Hi students, and welcome to our next math lesson. Today we're looking at two lessons, lessons 6 and 10, adding and subtracting decimals. Students will be able to add and subtract decimals. So we've been working with adding and subtracting decimals for a few days, and we've been using a few different methods. So first we started off with using the base 10 blocks, and then after that we switched to using models. And today we're going to learn how to add and subtract decimals without those tools. Now, of course, you're more than welcome to continue using those tools if you need it. I will use a place value chart today to show you how to do this, and you can also use that at home if you need it. So when we add and subtract numbers that have decimal values, we need to follow one major rule, and that major rule is to line up the decimal points. And if you follow that one rule, you should be successful with this skill. So let's look at a first example. 23 5/10 plus 6 24/100. So when we have a problem that is written side to side or horizontally, we do want to rewrite that problem so that it is stacked or vertical. So I'll start with my 23.5, and then I want to write 6 24/100 under that. And here's where you might need to take out your place value chart. So let's write our first number in the chart. It was 23 5/10. Well, here's the decimal point. Here's 23, and there's the 5/10. Our second number was 6 24/100. Here's the decimal point. 6 24/100. Now that you can see that when we use our place value chart to add these decimals, they're not, the digits are not lined up on top of each other perfectly. So that might bother some people. They might wonder, well, this guy is sticking out over here, this guy's sticking out. What you can do is annex a 0. Now we did this a few chapters ago when we were ordering and comparing numbers that had decimal values. So it's a similar idea. We line up the decimal points, and then if we have any holes or gaps, we annex a 0. Now we can go ahead and add these two numbers together. 0 plus 4 is 4. 5 plus 2 is 7. 3 plus 6 is 9. And 2 plus 0 is 2. So in other words, we add our hundredths together. We add our tenths together. We add our ones together, our tens together, etc. So let's go back to using this without a place value chart. After I write my first number, I will automatically write in a decimal point right underneath the other decimal point. Then I will build that second number around it. So what was right in front of my decimal point? A 6. What was right after my decimal point? A 2, and then a 4. And then I can see that above the 4, there are no hundredths. So I will write in a 0 to show that there are no hundredths in my first number. And now I can add it. I like to write my decimal point first so that I remember that it should be in that nice straight line. So we can see that nice straight line of decimal points. So our sum is 29 74/100. Let's try another problem. For this problem, let's take 106 23/1000 plus 2 65/100. Okay, let's write it on our place value chart. Our first number is 106 23/1000. 106 wholes and 23 thousandths. Our second number is 2 and 65 hundredths. Here's our decimal point, 2 wholes, 65 hundredths. So you can see that the digits really don't all line up to one side. I'm going to annex a 0 to show that there are no thousandths in my second number. And then I'm going to add them. Decimals are still all in a line. 3 thousandths plus 0 thousandths is still 3 thousandths. 2 hundredths plus 5 hundredths is 7 hundredths. 0 tenths plus 6 tenths are 6 tenths. 6 plus 2 is 8, 0, and 1. So we get a sum of 108 and 673 thousandths. And I want to show this to you without the place value chart as well. So I always start by writing out my first number. And then for my second number, I'm starting with that decimal point all lined up. What was in front of the decimal point? A 2. What was after it? 6 tenths, 5 hundredths. And we can see the same thing here. There's a missing digit in the thousandths of our second number. So we put in a 0. Now before I add, I'm going to get my decimal points all in a line. Now I can add. And I get the same sum, 108 and 673 thousandths. All right, let's do some subtraction. Subtraction follows the exact same rule for addition. So we are still lining up our decimal points and then subtracting. For our first problem, let's take 4 and 6 tenths minus 2 and 83 hundredths. So let's put that out on our place value chart. 4 wholes and 6 tenths minus 2 wholes and 83 hundredths. This is subtraction. Don't forget the basic rules of subtraction. And that That tends to be something that a lot of students will forget. So remember that in subtraction, you often have to borrow if there is not enough to take from. So when I look at this problem, I do see that whole. I see that my first number does not have any hundredths, but my second number does. So we need to annex a 0, and now we can see that there are 0 hundredths. And here's where a lot of students make a mistake with their subtraction. They say that 0 minus 3 is 3. Well, 0 minus 3 is not a 3. We have to borrow. So remember the rules of borrowing. That becomes a 10, and that becomes a 5 because we took 10 from this column and shifted it over here, which means this reduces by 1. Now we can subtract. 10 minus 3 is 7, not 3. All right, now let's look at our tenths. We cannot have 5 tenths and take away 8, so we have to borrow again. Go to our next column and reduce it by 1, and then we add 10 over to that tenths column. So it's now 15 minus 8, which is 7. And then when we subtract our 1s, 3 minus 2 is 1. So we get 1 and 77 hundredths. Without your place value chart, we're going to do the same thing as with adding. I'm writing in my first number, and then I'm putting my decimal point to get ready for my second number and building around that. 2 was in front of it, 83 was behind it. Remember, it's subtraction. I can see that I have a missing digit, so I place a 0 there. And then I want to follow my rules of subtraction. Lining up my decimal points. 0 becomes 10 because we're borrowing. 10 minus 3 is 7. I can't take 8 from 5, so I'm borrowing again. 15 minus 8 is 7, and then 3 minus 2 is 1. So we still get 1 and 77/100ths. All right, I want to do one more problem, and this is a problem that students sometimes get confused about when we have a whole number minus a decimal. So let's say we have the number 12, and we're taking away 3 6/10. So what can confuse students here is that they don't know what to do with this 12. They can clearly see a decimal point here, but they're like, well, wait a minute, where does the decimal point go for the 12? Using a place value chart can remind you, hopefully, that 12 is a whole number. So when we put it on our place value chart, since it's a whole number, it's in this section, the whole section. 12 is right here, which means that the decimal point lives at the end of it. Another way to write 12 is if you think of money and you have $12, we would put a decimal point after the 2 and put 2 zeros to show 12 whole dollars and 0 cents. So anytime you have a whole number, the decimal point lives after the ones place. It will never go wherever you feel like putting it. So we don't just put it in between or in front. It always goes after the ones. All right, now let's get our 3 6/10 in there. Here's our decimal point. 3 wholes and 6/10. Now remember, this was a subtraction problem. So up here in the tenths, I want to put a 0 to show that the whole number 12 has 0 tenths. And now I need to subtract. Decimal points are lined up. I cannot do 0 minus 6 without borrowing. So I reduce my ones place down to a 1. My tenths now becomes 10. 10 minus 6 is 4. And then I can't take 1 minus 3 without borrowing. So this becomes a 0. We add 10 to that 1, which makes 11. And then 11 minus 3 is 8. And now we have 0 over here. So we get 8 4/10. Without a place value chart, here's how I would line that up. I would take my whole number 12 and I would put in that decimal point so I don't forget that it's at the end. And then I would stack my other decimal point and build around it. Annex a 0. And then we subtract like normal. Get my decimal point stacked in there. And I still get 8 4/10. All right, I hope you found this lesson helpful, and I will see you again next time. Bye.